On today's wrestling news, the USA Network almost took the final NXT off the air.
CM Punk on WWE changing on Netflix.
A Netflix producer shoots on Vince McMahon.
And Dave Batista on how he lost everything after wrestling.
Careless. I'm Adam Wilborn.
I'm Michael Hamflett.
And this is the news. So it is a big week this week for NXT. It heads to the C-Dub.
Yeah.
It's going to be from Chicago. CM Punk's going to be there. And fingers crossed, Chuck Williams is going to become NXT champion again. Sorry, Ethan Page, friend of the channel. But obviously last week was the final episode of NXT on USA. According to Fightful Select, who have got the major report here, but also they report that the final NXT show was Goodbye USA. That was the internal name for that show.
Nice.
But you may remember the main event of last week's NXT was the big press conference. Roxanne Perez, Julia, "Oh, I'm going to take that bloody title from you," answering questions from the media.
Yeah.
And then that was obviously crashed by Stephanie Vaquer, who says, "I don't win. I don't care who wins the NXT Women's Championship because I've got next." Big story,
yeah.
really exciting. Yeah, it almost didn't happen because there was a bit of an overrun on NXT, a major overrun, in fact. So much so that the USA Network were like, "You better get this in because we are going to take you off the air at this rate." So there was a chance, there is a version of events where maybe Byron Saxton lets someone else ask another question and it just goes off the air with them being like, "And that's why I want to be NXT Women's Champ." And then it just cuts off and we don't even see Stephanie Vaquer. Yeah, it was close to being pulled from the USA Network, but it ended up wrapping seconds before that needed to happen. I never understand this. It's wild when you hear about, like, sometimes places have overruns. Obviously, AEW Dynamite often has an overrun nowadays. But then also there's versions, I know it used to work when it was like running out of tape or whatever, or we have to change tracks, really old-fashioned stuff. But like stuff like this is bonkers to me in 2024.
Do you think Shawn Michaels was having pained flashbacks to when him and Brett were doing the promo where Brett was in the wheelchair and it was supposed to end with a big climax of him super kicking Brett over the chair, and then Brett forgot his lines and Raw just goes black like that, and then Shawn thinks, "You bastard." Usually because they hated each other so much at the time. He did that as a shoot, but I was like, "I just forgot my words, I'm sorry." like he was just having, "Oh my God, kick somebody in the face quick," like that. Yeah, as you say, the particular nature of the segment is what makes it funny. It's a bit like when you've got this or like a big title match or something, and if it runs over, the result is lost, or they have to, I suppose one of the most infamous examples, slightly different set of circumstances, was Halloween Havoc 98 with Goldberg and DDP's title match, and them having to replay it for free on Nitro the next night, stuff like that. It's probably one of them.
There was one I remember where TNA did it, and they said, "Oh, we're going to roll on into whatever show used to come after Impact."
Yeah.
But British fans didn't get that, so it just went off the air. You were like, "What the hell's happening in the title match?"
We talk a lot, of course, about Peppa Pig in the UK.
Yes, when Bellator.
When it hits 6 a.m, and obviously that's how our watershed rules work.
Oh my God! Is he going to tap? Peppa Pig. I like to smash Peppa Pig in the face.
That's
later.
Yeah, well, it's slightly different, of course.
Daddy Pig for life. Can we have an NWO Daddy Pig, please?
Daddy Pig did an entrance into the cage. The Peppa Pig one, obviously, slightly different with Bellator being a shoot. But in wrestling, certainly, like we kind of sometimes take for granted, I guess, the timing out of things and exactly why matches go the length they go and how everything is timed seg by seg by seg by seg. So could have been like, I was going to say in like a lion, out like a lamb for NXT on USA.
Yeah.
It was kind of in like a lamb too as soon as Dynamite launched. So
yes, good point.
Lamb bookends for USA, nearly.
Yeah, also very funny now to think of Byron Saxton being like, "Who's that voice acting? Oh, it's Stephanie Vaquer. Oh, bloody hell, look at the time."
We're on it. Yeah, I guess where this won't be happening, one would assume, is when WWE moves to Netflix in January. We don't know yet if like they're going to be beholden to sort of timekeeping like they would have been on network television. We do know Raw is going back to 3 hours. David.
He came up with that.
As well as that, there has been a lot of discussion and speculation about how far WWE will be allowed to lean into the more violent overtones of pro wrestling away from the PG rating they've had all these years.
What about the Attitude Era?
Well, CM Punk has very much been
going... A long time since I dropped one of them.
Going down that path in response to a lot of the stuff that you see ahead of the Netflix move in January. He was speaking to the Hot Tag with Brady on 103.5 Kiss FM. These nuts and tomorrow. This breakfast has absolute dreadlock on here. We got the Brady in the pocket. So speaking to him, And he said, from the product, all I see is, I don't know, he didn't say that. I don't think you're going to see much difference with what it is now. We're pushing boundaries a little bit here and there. I just kind of want to temper people's expectations because there's a section of the fan base that go, they're going to Netflix, they're going to be full frontal and swearing. That is absolutely not the case.
No.
I think we've learned from, what was that period of time you just described?
Yeah, just era.
That you can only do that for so long before you do yourself every week, and then it just becomes bad television. He goes on to say, every once and again, you can push the envelope. I think what you're going to see is a difference to the product. I think there are still going to be commercials on Netflix. I'm 100% about that. We might be able to fudge it where it's not during matches. You're going to see maybe some play with the format. I'm not 100% on all that, but content-wise, I don't think you're going to see, as much as Rhea Ripley wants to come out there and talk like an Aussie and drop the C word here and there, you're not going to see that. So I think he's been a bit more realistic and pragmatic about people's expectations.
Has to be.
It's pretty cool that like you can dabble with sort of how you use commercials, how you use runtimes, so you don't get a situation like NXT one. We assume Raw's going 3 hours, but if it wants to go 2 hours 21 weeks because it needs to, or because if you want to do
that's a good point.
Iron Man match that opens, who knows what? It just feels like there's a bit more of a landscape to play.
Yeah, it's flexible, isn't it? Yeah. And I think they should learn from AEW because like AEW's had a lot of like effing and jeffing, and there was a lot of blood, and then they sort of cut back on it, and wild spots and what have you. I think if you just go, anyone can do anything. And mid-carders that aren't fighting for anything are busting each other wide open and swearing all the time. It takes away the impact of all that. So I think he's right. I think yes, there will be more freedom to do that sort of thing. I'm interested to see how the whole advertising thing works on Netflix, as he alludes to there as well. But yeah, you don't want someone who's just lost some meaningless tag match to be like, motherfucker! Like, you want that to be like the real blood feuds.
What still isn't getting spoken about is how on Netflix there is no rules about days of the week. Like, it's WWE. What if they're just like,
don't say that.
I'm gonna say the words Wednesday Night Raw, and you know why I've picked that day, but it still isn't getting discussed that like Raw lives on a Monday now because it has to because of the constraints of television.
They could just release all of the Raws of the year on the same day.
January 1st, an entire year's worth of Raw, then give the wrestlers it's a heavy day's work. Like you got 52.
Oh God!
Like WrestleMania's banked, the whole thing. They just knock it all out.
I hate the fact that they just release whole series. I know I'm very old-fashioned for this. I much preferred it when they'd like stagger it.
Yeah.
I'm talking to you, love.
Oh yeah, I actually hear that you're seeing Netflix integration coming into like wrestling across the board now. There was some point in the middle of Rampage the other week I was watching, the thing came up and said, "Are you still watching this?"
Same feeling about Collision this week, to be honest, brother. Reviewing that later on today.
Full AEW news coming elsewhere. Like
we've got another.
Got WWE news this morning, AEW news this afternoon. That's why I was split. We get in trouble. Let us know in the comments what your favourite wrestling show is.
How do you lose a match when you control all the rules? What the hell's that all about? It's one of the worst things I've ever seen. We'll talk more about it later with Sid.
I suppose you will.
Yeah. Right, speaking of Netflix, producers shot on Vince McMahon. Matt Maxon was on an interview with Kevin Aioli talking about working with Vince and the difficulties that such a thing has.
Yeah.
So many things that made it into that series, you can see it's not just necessarily passion, it's asking things he's never heard before, says Matt. There's a moment where he says, there are times where I say isn't necessarily what I mean. That was such a fulfilling thing. He's like, I'm the chairman of the board, I'm not going to tell you the truth. We even set that up from the very beginning. He's not a reliable narrator, but Chris did many subtle ways of getting that out. I just think it was such an art form, really able to allow us to show in a much different way. He alludes to the fact that sometimes Vince would make statements that he think would cover off the allegations, and they'd just keep the cameras rolling and not respond and leave that silence. So he was encouraged to keep talking and maybe give a little bit more, because sometimes it does seem a little bit frustrating, that documentary, that they have very pre-prepared answers for the big, allegations and accusations towards Vince McMahon. He's hit the nail on the head. He's not a reliable narrator. Over the years, how many times has stories changed or been altered when the facts change because you want to present yourself in the right light? And I think that's one of the big takeaways you get from watching this documentary is, and maybe partially WWE are hoping people will just see it at face value and go, Vince isn't a great guy, but we've all got our foibles. But I hope that the way Netflix is running, it's not to the greatest extent. I think all of us would agree on that, but they've at least tried to show you that you know, when there's a great bit I've just watched on, is it episode 5 maybe? Where he says, like, we didn't do this, we didn't do this, we didn't do this. And they just show you an example each time that you definitely did do that.
Yeah.
Because, there's been a long time of WWE presenting the facts. And WWE, you know, presenting the history of wrestling, basically.
Yeah, with each passing day, I see a new positive and a new negative on this documentary, like every day. So you hear these stories about how difficult it was to work with Vince McMahon, and like these comments here about like somebody from within the documentary talking about him being an unreliable narrator, and I sort of feel an element of sympathy and think to myself, well, considering that, what you put together was quite impressive.
Yeah.
And then I'm also like, right, so you're acknowledging that he's an unreliable narrator, so where's your reliable one?
Yeah.
6 episodes and the only one I can find is Dave Meltzer. Like, and full credit to Dave for that, and I hope he's won a lot of people's respect back, but thankfully should have known better as to like sort of talk him down in the way they do just because they don't like some of his star ratings and his tweets.
Yeah.
Like, he was there to be a bit of an ombudsman for a lot of the stuff.
Surprisingly, Heyman comes across well. As not very rare you say that in terms of the storytelling.
I think the fact that he's telling the truth gets a bit obscured by how theatrical he is in the way that he tells the stories.
I could listen to him all day.
He's that kind of a rater, isn't he? But then you've got like, I think we watched the first episode together, and I popped when Kay Koplovitz from USA Network appeared on screen because I was aware of her being so integral to WWE's existence in the difficulty, as she says at one point, which I don't think has ever been said out loud before. Well, if Vince goes to prison, that's raw off the air. And you don't think about that, like everybody always says, oh, Jerry Jarrett was going to take over, but nobody ever stopped to go, well, says who? Like the TV network was in control of that. And what's the domino effect? If the market leader leaves television, does wrestling like suddenly just have even less value than it already did? Does Hogan in WCW rise the way he does? Can WCW pounce on the opportunity, or do they fall as a result? What happens? You know what I mean? There's like
not ready for it.
Yeah. So there's like so few reliable narrators that like once something is said by somebody very in the bubble, like Bruce Pritchard or an Eric Bischoff or a Vince McMahon himself, like who gives a toss about the Ruthless Aggression era? It was 2 weeks, 3 promos and 4 fortnights worth of television. Like, it's just like there isn't then that voice other than Dave Meltzer hilariously when they talk about WrestleMania 3 to actually push back. The whole documentary needed it. So I'm thinking, sympathies, and then also we'll find one then. If you acknowledge that there's somebody that isn't that stronger voice, find one. But anyway, pros and cons, it's like we're going to keep having conversations on this now. Mainly at some point together we'll get together and do a video.
Yeah.
We did have a video in mind and we're going to explain probably on that video why it's taken us a bit longer to do it. But Miller will be here with his ups and downs as well. Hopefully everybody will eventually have been able to watch the whole thing. As my initial suspicions where I think conversation will continue to run.
Yeah.
And I think there'll be call for a follow-up as well. I think this isn't
Kevin Dunn and Vince shooting their own response.
I think that was just a work. I think that was just made up stuff that did the rounds on Twitter.
Funny idea.
I'd watch it though.
Yeah.
I'd watch it. Now I want to Making a Murderer Series 2 where like a new lawyer has entered the fray. You know, let's get Ann Callis involved and let's have her as the pushing back voice. Last but not least here, sort of a happy ending story to a difficult time as Dave Batista, who has been sort of in and around the news lately, as he always is now as a actor, but whenever he sort of mentions wrestling, it becomes a story because he's such a big deal. And
Come on back, Dave.
Yeah, exactly. We just love him. He was interviewed by the School of Hard Knocks Instagram, which is just one of those guys with a tiny microphone that make it appear as if they're speaking to somebody like as a car's parked at traffic lights, or they're just, I've just bumped into a massive celebrity on the streets of New York, and they have like 2 minutes, and it's like, what can you get out of this, like sort of hard-hitting question type things, and he basically just asks what's the best advice he ever gave, Dave ever got, sorry. And he mentions that the advice from wrestlers were the sort of the most salient because he was younger in his career at the time. And he mentions that he got one of the best pieces of advice he ever got was from The Undertaker, who simply told him, always live within your means and play bones, kid.
Wow.
He said most of that anyway.
Okay.
The Dominoes bit, I might have heard in the back of my mind somewhere. And Dave added, he said, quote, I learned that the hard way. I came out of wrestling and I literally lost everything. My house got foreclosed, but I had a second opportunity to be successful in the film industry. Now that money in the bank means more to me than something I don't really need. So speculatively, I think he's referring to the 2010 period where he first left wrestling to make it in Hollywood and all the money was gone. A little tidbit on the back end of this as well. He does a note from Triple H, who during the Evolution years said, and measure of the man, goes, quote, look man, you want to make money or you want to make friends? Obviously Triple H taking that advice from Scott Hall. Said, you're a business. Always imagine that everybody's always pointing a gun at your head. It's up to you how many bullets you give them. It's a business.
But enjoy yourself out there. Big smiles on faces.
Big smiles on faces. But yeah, lost everything. And then had a second run, became a massive and beloved film star, made it all back.
don't remember him ever winning Money in the Bank. I thought he was always world champion just for... Anyway, got confused by that.
Must have got the lunchbox for his collection.
Yeah, look, it's always tough when you hear that. Like, because you think, back in like 2006 or whatever, one of the biggest things in wrestling, and he leaves and he's like, where's everything gone?
Yeah.
Glad it's all worked out in the end. He's doing phenomenally well in Hollywood, deservedly so as well.
Yeah.
He's not just someone who you're just like, well, you're big and jacked, so that's, I mean, I could do that if I was yours. Like, he's great. He's genuinely, like, I loved him in, The Knives Out.
Yes, yeah.
I thought he was fantastic in that. Obviously, Guardians of the Galaxy, he's brilliant in that. And
Seems a good egg, doesn't he?
yeah, good guy, and I'm glad it's all worked out for him. He did that thing at West Ham, didn't he? He had that.
Was that the last season of Upton Park as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
They used it for aye. And like other really credible pieces of work that idiots like me and you have absolutely no clue of.
Forever blowing bubbles, pretty bubbles in the air.
What's your favourite football-related movie? And why is it Danny Dyer in the Football Factory?
Gold Trilogy, better than Lord of the Rings for me.
What's that?
The Gold Trilogy.
Oh, the Gold Trilogy.
Yeah, far better than Lord of the Rings. Jesus Christ. I mean, the third one kind of falls off, but at least there's two good films in there.
Puny Belter!
With the nation's second favourite team.
But yeah, good to see.
We're all about the entertainers. Different time.
Good to see Dave's doing well now.
Walk have.
And
We should have been heroes.
And good advice for everyone: live within your means.
Yeah.
And the other good piece of advice: watch this video. Huh? Bye.